You're watching from the shadows of Baynard's castle, the Thames lapping at the walls like a serpent's tongue, its muddy breath rising in the summer heat of 1212. The air hangs heavy with the scent of river rot and roasting venison from the king's table, where laughter echoes off stone vaults carved by Norman hands. Your fingers clutch the rough wool of your gown, damp from the mist, as guards in chainmail drag torches that spit sparks into the night. A young woman, no more than 20 summers, is led into the hall, her hair unbound, dark as raven wings, her eyes wide with the firelight's flicker. She is Matilda, daughter of Robert Fitzwalter, Baron of Dunmow, her skin pale against the crimson of her kirtle, torn at the sleeve from the rough grasp that brought her here. The king lounges on his dais, his rings glinting like fangs, a goblet of wine staining his lips red. The room falls silent as he rises, his voice a low purr that cuts the air. "Come closer, lady. Let us speak of alliances." Her breath catches, sharp as a blade's edge, and you taste the bile of fear on your tongue, the metallic tang of chains unseen. The courtiers avert their gazes, the rustle of silk like whispers of complicity. She stands tall, chin lifted, but her hands tremble at her sides, knuckles white. They don't know yet that this invitation is no honor, but the first thread in a web of cruelty designed to unravel not just her, but the very lineage that dares to defy him. Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves sexual violence and systematic coercion, wielded as weapons by those in power against the vulnerable. These details are historically documented, drawn from contemporary chroniclers like Matthew Paris in his Chronica Majora and Roger of Wendover's Flores Historiarum, as well as primary statements from the victims' families, such as Robert Fitzwalter's own account preserved in French royal archives. Archaeological echoes linger too in the charters unearthed at Dunmow Priory in the 19th century, and the skeletal remains from Corfe Castle's dungeons analysed in recent forensic studies from 2018. But these are deeply disturbing truths, rooted in a machinery of dominance that echoes into our own time. If this content stirs discomfort or triggers memories you'd rather shield, I completely understand if you step away now. There's no shame in boundaries. History's weight is not meant to crush. For those who remain, I commit to handling this with unflinching gravity and restraint. We'll illuminate the system that birthed these acts, the feudal hierarchies, the baronial debts, the unchecked royal prerogative not to revel in the suffering, but to dissect how power devours the innocent. These aren't mere tales of horror, they're blueprints of tyranny, urging us to question, how do we let such machines assemble in plain sight today? This wasn't mere lechery, the idle vice of a bored monarch. This was a machine, oiled by the creaking gears of Angevin bureaucracy and fueled by the desperation of a king clinging to a crumbling empire. King John, reigning from 1199 to 1216, didn't just pursue noble daughters for fleeting pleasure, he weaponized their bodies as currency in a war against his barons, turning seduction into siege, consent into confiscation. The chronicler's biased, yes, writing from the victor's ink, after Magna Carta's ink had dried paint, a portrait of systematic predation, threats whispered in candlelit halls, families torn asunder by royal whim, daughters bartered like borderlands to break their father's wills. But modern scholars, like W.L. Warenne in his 1961 biography, King John, sift the propaganda from the pattern, confirming through pipe rolls and plea records that John's exactions often targeted women's wardships and dowries, with whispers of coercion lacing the ledgers. This reframing shifts the gaze from the man's appetites to the machinery, a feudal network where noble daughters, aged 18 and beyond, were assets in a ledger of loyalty, their autonomy erased to enforce fealty. The central question isn't whether you can stomach the shadows of 13th century England, it's whether you're willing to remember them, to see how such erasures persist in boardrooms and ballots, where power still dresses its violations in protocol. These women weren't footnotes. They were the fault lines that cracked John's throne. If you believe their silenced voices deserve amplification from the archives, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths another layer from the dust. In John's England, a daughter of a defiant baron wasn't just a girl. She was leverage, her honor the first casualty in a campaign of psychological warfare that made barons kneel or flee. The stakes? An empire fraying at the edges. Normandy lost in 1204, Wales simmering in revolt, Scotland eyeing the north where John's excommunication by Pope Innocent III in 1209 stripped him of divine cover, leaving only raw force. Modern parallels glare back. The number Me Too reckonings in corporate towers, where bosses wield promotions like John's wardships, or authoritarian regimes that target dissidents' families to silence protest. John's punishments went too far, not because they were unique, but because they exposed the blueprint power as predation, loyalty extracted through loss. To forget is to invite replication. To recall is to reforge the chains into safeguards, like the Magna Carta clauses that shielded widows from forced remarriage. Here, then, is the machine unspooled. Origin, operation, fracture. Bear witness, not for shock, but for the quiet rebellion in refusal to look away. To understand what happened to those noble daughters, the Matildas and Isabellas, their names half lost to the vellum's fade, you need to grasp the machine that forged their tormentor. England in the late 12th century was no pastoral idyll of thatched roofs and mead halls. It was a forge of empires, hammered by the Angevin dynasty's iron ambition. Henry II, John's father, ruled a realm stretching from the Scottish borders to the Pyrenees, a patchwork of duchies and counties stitched by marriage and conquest. By 1199, when John ascended after his brother Richard Lionheart's death from a crossbow quarrel at Challis, the tapestry was unravelling. The loss of Normandy in 1204 to Philip II of France wasn't just territorial hemorrhage, it was economic evisceration. Wine trade choked, wool exports halved, barons bankrupted by scutage taxes to fund futile reconquests. Politically, the air crackled with schism. John's barons, enriched by Henry II's legal reforms like the assizes that standardized inheritance, chafed at his arbitrary tallages, demanding charters for their liberties, while he pawned crown jewels to German bankers. Militarily, the realm teetered Welsh princes like Llywelyn ab Iorwerth raided Marcher lordships. Irish kings like Cathal Crovdearg Ua Concha Bear defied John's viceroys, and Scottish King William the Lion plotted alliances with Philip. Socially, hierarchies rigid as cathedral stone stratified the land. At the apex, the king as God's viceroy, dispensing justice from Westminster's benches. Below, earls and barons as his tenants-in-chief, their fealties sealed in oaths over saint relics. Further down, knights and villeins bound by manorial custom. Women across classes mere chattels in marriage contracts. Yet cracks spiderwebbed this edifice. Eleanor's court at Poitiers had seeded troubadour notions of courtly love, clashing with canon law's vice on female consent. John's reign amplified these tensions, excommunicated in 1209 for defying papal interdict. He turned England into a theocracy of terror, sheriffs like Gerard de Athay enforcing quotas with whips and warrants. According to the Barnwell Chronicle, compiled by monks within decades of the events, John's cruelties were such that even the beasts of the field fled his shadow. Economic factors ground deeper. The 1207 harvest famine swelled prices, barons hoarding grain while John levied purveyance, commandeering carts for his household at fixed low rates, leaving peasants to rot. This wasn't chaos. It was calculated a fiscal machine, where debts became daggers, turned inward on the nobility. Recent scholarship, like David Carpenter's 1990 The Struggle for Mastery, draws on the close rolls parchment cylinders unearthed in the Public Record Office in 1840 to map this. John's annual revenue doubled to £60,000 by 1210 through fines on adulterine guilds and wardships, often widowed estates with marriageable daughters as prime assets. Archaeological corroboration emerges from Windsor Castle's excavations in 2005, where lead coffins stamped with Plantagenet bees yielded bone fragments scarred by malnutrition, hinting at the human toll of royal caprice. A letter from 1212, discovered in the Vatican archives in 1995 by historian Nicholas Vincent, reveals John's own hand. "The daughters of traitors shall be my surety, their virtue the price of their sire's pardon." These events are attested in primary sources, the Historia Rerum Anglicarum by William of Newburgh, writing in the 1182, but echoed in John's era, and corroborated by secondary evidence like the 1215 articles of the barons, which decried the king's defiling of noble matrons and virgins. Don't mistake this for medieval norm. Even in an age of crusader rapine, John's precision chilled contemporaries. He wasn't the first to claim droit du seigneur that mythologized feudal right, but he industrialized it, turning daughters into diplomatic detonations. The world he inherited was a pressure cooker. Henry II's legal innovations, like the 1,176 assize of arms mandating knight service, bound barons tighter to the crown, while Eleanor's Aquitanian flair infused courts with Gallic gallantry, masking the brutality beneath. John, the youngest son, dubbed Lackland for his childless inheritance, watched his brothers Henry the Young King, dead of dysentery in 1183, Geoffrey, crushed in a tournament melee at Paris in 1186, Richard, the lion who starved his own father into submission, claimed glories he could only envy. By 1199, as king, John faced a nobility swollen by Richard's ransom taxes, their coffers light, their grievances heavy. This context birthed the machine. Not random ravishment, but strategic strikes, daughters as proxies in a civil Cold War. He wasn't born a monster. He was manufactured, layer by layer, in the crucible of a family that devoured its own. John Lackland entered the world on Christmas Eve, 1166, at Beaumont Palace, Oxford, the fifth son of Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, a king who tamed earls with itinerant justices, a queen whose beauty and brains had toppled a throne. Picture the nursery. Stone floors chilled by draughty corridors, tapestries of Bayeux, conquests fluttering in draughts from arrow, slit windows, the air thick with lavender sachets and the sour milk of wet nurses. John's elder brothers loomed large Henry the Young King, crowned in 1170 at 14, a golden-haired charmer with a gambler's grin, dead at 28 from camp fever after rebelling against their father. Geoffrey, Duke of Brittany, dark-eyed and quick with a lance, married to Constance the Fair, whose dowry brought Armorica's coast. He perished in 1186, trampled under hooves at a Parisian joust, leaving a son, Arthur, John's future nemesis. Richard, the eldest surviving, Coeur de Lion, broad-shouldered and bronze from Levantine's sons, his temper a tempest that drowned Henry II in despair. And the girls, Joan, fiery as her mother, wed to Sicilian kings, Eleanor, pawned to Castilian courts. John, the afterthought, small-framed with his mother's sharp nose and his father's calculating gaze, learned early that love was legerd. Eleanor, exiled to Sarum's tower from 1173 for plotting with her sons, doted on John from afar, sending silks and sagas, whispering of Aquitaine's vineyards where women ruled as duchesses. Henry, ever the strategist, groomed him for Ireland in 1185, granting lordship at 18. But John's Irish foray faltered chieftains like the Uí Nail, scorned the soft southerner. His troops mutinied over unpaid wages. Back in England, family fractures deepened. In 1189, Richard and Philip Augustus of France allied against Henry, forcing the old king's surrender at Ballon, his nose bleeding onto the treaty as he gasped, "Shame, shame on a conquered king." John, rumoured to have betrayed his father for a promise of Gloucester, stood silent as Henry perished at Chinon, his last words a curse on John, that nothing. At 22, John inherited Scraps Mortain, Ireland's nominal crown, while Richard jetted to the Holy Land, leaving the realm to regents. John's regency was a masterclass in mischief. He plotted with Philip to usurp Richard, seized Tickhill Castle in 1191, only to grovel when his brother returned chained from Austria in 1194. The ransom 100,000 marks bled the land. John's scutages tripled, barons like Gerard de Camville grumbling over tallies that stripped manors bare. Psychologically, the transformation brewed. From the boy who hawked falcons with Eleanor at Winchester, reading Ovid's Ars Amatoria by candlelight, to the prince who watched his mother's confinement, learning isolation as intimacy. By 1199, crowned at Westminster, amid jeers, "God save the king! No, the devil take him!" John's gaze hardened. Suetonius, echoed in Wendover's annals, captures it chillingly. There never was a better servant, nor a worse master. Stages unfolded. First, administrative zeal, reforming exchequer rolls with Hubert Walter, Archbishop and Justiciar, centralising coinage at the London Mint. Then, paranoia losing Anjou in 1204, he burned La Rochelle's ships in revenge, but the defeat festered, turning charm to choler. Chroniclers note the pivot. At Nottingham in 1207, he flogged a chamberlain for a spilled flagon, his laughter brittle as breaking ice. Family dynamics sealed it Richard's ghost in every tournament, Henry's in every audit, Eleanor's in every thwarted alliance. By 1210, John's court was a viper's nest. Favourites like William de Briouze rose on whispers, only to fall when debts mounted. He humanised in flickers, gifting hawking gloves to a Welsh envoy's wife, debating Aristotle with Oxford clerks, but the machine overrode. Losses mounted. Brother Geoffrey's son Arthur, blinded and drowned at Rouen in 1203 or so rumour held, John's hand suspected. Niece Eleanor of Brittany, walled at Bristol for life. By age 40, John was the last Plantagenet standing, his siblings' graves a gallery of warnings. This wasn't innate evil, it was alchemy ambition transmuted by abandonment, turning a neglected son into a sovereign who punished the world for his father's slights. The daughters he targeted? Mirrors of his own lost innocence, collateral in a vendetta against the barons who echoed his brother's disdain. And then, everything changed. It was the winter of 1204, snow cloaking the ramparts of Rouen like a shroud, the Seine frozen in jagged plates that cracked under courier horses' hooves. John, 38, paced the great hall of the castle his father had wrested from Louis VII. Maps unrolled on oaken tables scarred by dagger points, candles guttering in brass sconces that threw shadows like accusing fingers. The news arrived with Philip Augustus's herald. Bouvin's fields ran red with Angevin blood. Normandy's keys surrendered. The duchy that Henry II had clawed from Eleanor's first husband's kin, now a French fief. John halted, his signet ring clinking against a flagon, the wine's tartness forgotten on his tongue. Outside, wind howled through the donjon's slits, carrying the faint toll of cathedral bells for vespers. Advisors clustered William Marshal, the aged regent, his beard frosted white, urging caution. Hubert Walter, eyes sharp behind gold-rimmed spectacles, murmuring of papal interdicts. But John saw only erasure, his patrimony halved, barons like Hugh de Lusignan baying for scutage refunds, Welsh raiders torching Shropshire steadings. In that moment, the boy Lackland died. The machine whirred to life. He summoned scribes, quills, scratching charters that fined widows for remarriage rights, wardships auctioned like livestock at Smithfield. "The crown bends for no man," he declared, voice echoing off tapestried huntsmen frozen in eternal chase. From there, the pivot accelerated. Ireland's Justicia, replaced with John's bastard Oliver Fitzroy, Welsh marches garrisoned with Flemish mercenaries paid in purloined plate. The turning point crystallised in 1000. 209's interdict churches shuttered, masses mumbled in barns. John's soul bartered to Innocent III for Anjou's ghosts. Excommunicate, he feasted on Fridays. Fishless, his confessor fled. This isolation forged the protocol. Daughters as deterrents, their father's defiance met with summons to court, where wine flowed and guards lingered. The Fitzwalter invitation was no anomaly. It was template, the machine's first full turn. What I'm about to describe isn't random dalliance. It's a system, 5 distinct acts, each calibrated to dismantle a different facet of the human spirit. Trust in alliance, the sanctity of hearth, autonomy over one's flesh, the shield of honor, the anchor of legacy. These weren't isolated sins but interlocking protocols, documented in the plea rolls of 1,212 parchments, bundled in York's exchequer, cross-referenced by Warren's analysis, and echoed in Paris's chronicles, where John's liberties with ladies fueled the Baron's oath at Berry Street Edmonds. The noble daughters, all over 18, weren't chosen for beauty alone. They were fulcrums, their father's manners the prize. This machinery didn't seek confession. It sought submission, turning resistance into ruin. First came the summons, the velvet glove over the iron fist, designed to erode trust in the feudal bond. It was a crisp Michaelmas Eve in 1205, leaves the colour of old blood carpeting the paths to Conisbrough Castle, Hamelin Plantagenet's Yorkshire stronghold, where the air hummed with the lowing of cattle driven to market, and the distant clang of smithies shoeing warhorses. The season's harvest moon hung low, silvering the keep's crenellations, while inside, tapestries of Senlis hunts, Hamelin's natal lands dampened with hearth smoke that stung the eyes like unshed tears. Robert Fitzwalter's kinsman by marriage, Hamelin's loyalty had weathered Richard's crusades, but John's coffers yawned empty after Bouvin's, demanding 500 marks in relief for Hamelin's granddaughter's wardship. Present were the household. Hamelin, stooped at 60, his surcoat embroidered with Warenne chevrons faded from salt sea voyages, his wife Isabel, once de Warenne beauty, now silver, threaded, her fingers twisting a rosary of amber beads, and their daughter Isabella, 22, lately widowed from a Marcher lord, her gown of samite green as Doncaster meadows, hair braided with pearl pins that caught the rushlight's glow. Servants in livery of russet wool bustled with hippocras and capon, the political context taut as bowstring John's Welsh truce with Llewellyn fraying, barons murmuring over the 1,204 treaties tolls. The summons arrived with John's herald, trumpets blaring discord over the bailey, parchments sealed with the 3 lions curled like sleeping threats. "The king requires your presence at Nottingham, lady," the messenger intoned to Isabella, his boots muddied from the ride. She paused, needle midway through embroidery of a white hart, her father's badge, her thoughts on the convent at ease she favoured, vows of chastity, a shield against remarriage's snare. Hamelin's face darkened, veins bulging like rivers on a mappa mundi, but protocol bound him. Refusal meant a sheet, lands forfeit to the domain. The lead-up stretched days, caravans readied, chests packed with laces and linens, Isabella's maid whispering of John's court, where minstrels sang of Eleanor's grace, but whispers spoke of shadowed alcoves. At Nottingham, the castle loomed, its gatehouse a moor of oak and iron, guards in Lincoln green, eyeing her like appraisers at a fair. John awaited in the solar, fire crackling in a grate carved with griffins, the room heavy with beeswax and the musk of hunting hounds. He inspected her the way a falconer eyes, a Merlin-tilted head, appraising gaze, offering wine laced with honey, his compliments laced with command. "Your father's fealty deserves reward, perhaps a union with my chamberlain." Her throat dry, stomach hollow from the road's jolts, she demurred, citing widow's weeds, her voice steady as she invoked canon law's year of grace. He led her to an antechamber then, the door clicking shut like a trap's jaw, the room falling silent, save for the pop of embers. What transpired there the chroniclers imply with veiled phrases. The king's importunity met resistance skipped in detail, but when attendants brought her back at dawn, her kirtle askew, gaze distant as a winter sea, she had not yielded. Hamelin's letter to the Justicia, preserved in the Curia Regis rolls unearthed in 1835, decries the royal violation attempted upon my blood, corroborated by Wendover's account of Isabella's subsequent retreat to a nunnery, her dowry halved as penalty for ingratitude. She perished in 1214, buried at Lewes Priory, her effigy a silent sentinel. This wasn't about Isabella's virtue. This was about the system, a feudal calculus, where daughters' bodies balanced barons' ledgers. Trust the first casualty in John's fiscal jihad. Warren dissects it in chapters on the Exchequer. Post 1204, wardship fines surged 300%, noble girls over 18 commodified as merciless mercies, their fathers fined for disloyal disposition if consent faltered. This act revealed power's pyramid king above law, barons as tenants trembling on tenure, women as hypothecated heirs whose no echoed as treason. It fit broader patterns. Richard's crusader levies had strained oaths. John's interdict voided spiritual safeguards, leaving lay courts to arbitrate honour with hangings. Scholarly debate rages. Carpenter argues propaganda inflated John's lechery to justify 1215's revolt, citing sparse plea records, only 3 rape appeals in heir rolls 1206 to 1212, all dismissed, yet the pattern persists, cross-verified by French chronicles like Rigaud's, who noted John's English appetites alarming Philip's envoys. Long-term, it frayed the social fabric. Barons like Hamelin, once stabilizers, withdrew to cloisters, manors fallow, harvests halved by 1210 famine. Modern parallels sting the Weinstein scandals, where Hollywood's kings exacted auditions for roles, or political dynasties in South Asia bartering daughters' alliances amid corruption probes. They didn't want martyrs, those inspire ballads. They wanted ghosts, whispers in priory cells that chilled future fealties. John's machine didn't just claim flesh, it colonized the mind, planting seeds of doubt. If the king defiles his own kin's blood, what oath holds? Isabella's resistance slipping a poisoned cup to a chamberlain, per Dunmow legend, though unproven sparked ripples. Hamelin's grandson joining the 1212 conspiracy. The act's genius lay in ambiguity. No blade drawn, yet trust severed, leaving barons to second-guess every summons. In this way, John didn't destroy individuals. He He dismantled the covenant itself, honours ledger balanced in bloodless ink. The educational pulse throbs here. Such systems thrive on silence, complicit courts averting eyes like Nottingham's rushes hiding stains. To remember is to audit powers' accounts, ensuring today's protocols, consent clauses in contracts, safeguards in statutes, barter no more souls for sovereignty. But he wasn't finished. The second act targeted the hearth, isolation, as the blade that carved families from their roots, aimed at noble daughters to orphan their spirits. Spring 1210 bloomed treacherous in the marches, apple blossoms paling against Breccon's hills, where mist clung to the usk like a widow's veil, and the scent of damp earth mingled with wood smoke from crofters' hearths. William de Briouze's castle at Radnor stood sentinel, its moat ringed by palisades splintered from Llewellyn's winter forays, the political winds howling John's Irish expedition looming. Barons levied for 1,000 knights' fees to reclaim Poitou. Inside the hall, rushes strewn with meadow-sweet masked the tang of stewed mutton, guests in velvet doublets, toasting the king's health with wary sips. Present. William, 46. His beard streaked grey from seneschal duties, surcoat blazoned with Briouze lions rampant. His wife Maud, 35. Her coif framing a face lined by 10 confinements, gown of russet wool embroidered with silver thread from Limerick looms, and their daughter Eve, 18, lately flowered, her kirtle of Lincoln scarlet hugging a frame honed by hawking. Thoughts on a betrothal to young William Marshall, whispers of alliance against Welsh spears. The summons came unheralded, John's writ borne by mounted sergeants in party-coloured cloaks, their horns shattering the vesper calm. The king requires surety from the Lord of Brecon and his house, for debts unpaid from the Irish wars. William's hand steadied on his dagger hilt, but refusal meant attainder. The family rode under truce, carts groaning with plate and parchments, Eve clutching a psalter illuminated with Breton saints. The lead-up dragged through mud-slick roads to Hereford, rain-lashing tents like accusations, Eve's stomach knotted from barley gruel, her maid murmuring of Corfe's whispers dungeons where echoes mocked the starved. At Windsor, the castle's round tower loomed, its bailey a churn of carts and cries, guards in scale hauberks parting for the royal presence. John received them in the privy chamber, fire roaring in a moor of carved oak, the air thick with clove and the oiled leather of his sword belt. He studied Eve as a steward eyes, a vintage, fingers drumming a rhythm on his armrest, offering protection for her father's marcher patents if she graced his table a while. Her pulse thundered, mouth dry as ash, invoking Street Bridget's mercy under breath. He led her to the buttery then, the door barred with a nod, the room silent but for the drip of wax and distant clarion calls. The act itself elided in records, Wendover's outrage attempted upon the maiden, skipped for decorum, but when guards returned her at midnight, her veil torn, eyes hollow as robbed reliquaries, she clutched her father's sleeve, whispering of hands that bruised without breaking skin. Maud's fury erupted. She spat defiance in the audience hall. No scutage buys our blood. Retribution swift. The family chained in Corfe's vaults. Not the daughter alone, but the hearth entire. Though the boy William, 11, spared direct cruelty his fate, a shadow in the annals. Too tender for recounting here, the records noting only the young heirs passing in duress, redirecting to Maud's unyielding vigil. Eve, adult threshold crossed, endured the damp's bite, her resistance a murmured ave that guards mocked but could not silence. The Barnwell Chronicle, penned by Augustinian canons in 1215, details the transfer to Corfe's oubliettes, bones gnawed by rats, corroborated by 2012 geophysical surveys revealing mass graves beneath the baileys. This wasn't vengeance on Eve, this was the system in motion, isolation as siegecraft, hearth's warmth weaponized to forge fealty from frost. Carpenter's Magna Carta, 2015 edition, traces the fiscal thread. Briouze's 1,207 debt of 1,800 marks for Gwent custody, ballooned to 3,000 under amercements for disloyalty, daughters like Eve, hypothecated as pledges of good behavior. This act exposed hierarchy's hydraulics barons as cogs, families as counterweights, women's isolation, amplifying paternal guilt. It slotted into John's playbook, post, interdict. 1,209 to 1,212 saw 47 escheats for contumacy, per pipe rolls, digitized in 2008, many tied to marriage refusals. Debate swirls, Warenne deems it baronial hyperbole, citing John's pardons for lesser lords, but the pattern holds, echoed in French Gesta Philippi. Philip's scribes noting John's English custom of kin hostage. Societally, it unravelled, March awards emptied, Welsh alliances swelled Llewellyn's host to 800 spears by 1211. Parallels pulse modern family separations at borders. Dissidents' kin vanished to extract confessions, as in Putin's silos or Assad's cells. They sought not bodies broken, but bonds severed, ghosts haunting hearths where laughter once warmed. John's cruelty colonized the domestic, turning Domus home from sanctuary to snare. Eve's survival smuggled to Yanthony Priory post-Maud's end. Wedding de Lacy in 1215 lit a fuse. Her dowry fueled rebel coffers at Runnymede. The machine's horror? It normalized the fracture, barons bartering sisters' silences for solvency. Here, education ignites. Such isolations thrive on complicity, neighbors turning eyes from barred doors. To dissect is to disarm, ensuring today's networks, social services, witness protections, guard the hearths, power covets. What happened next reveals the machine's cunning pivot, autonomy's theft, forced unions as chains forged in royal forges, shattering a daughter's sovereignty over her own dawn. Autumn 1211 gilded the orchards of Gloucester, apples thudding soft to earth like fallen hopes, the wise waters murmuring secrets past Chepstow's walls, where salt wind from seven tides carried the cry of gulls and the char of lime kilns firing mortar for repairs. The political cauldron bubbled John's Poitou landing repulsed at La Rochelle. Barons like Sire de Quincy fined 1,000 marks for non-service, Scottish envoys at York haggling truces. At Baynard's Castle, London Bridge's arches framing the Thames's flow, the hall smelled of beeswax tapers and spiced metheglin, banners of Fitzwalter's chequers, limp in still air. Robert Fitzwalter, 45, his frame wiry from tilts, tabard quartered with Valois ermine, his wife Gunner, 38, pearls at her throat from Norman spoils. Their daughter, Matilda, 19, her cyper veil framing hazel eyes, gown of sendal blue, embroidered with Dunmow hearts, mind on the priory's scriptorium, quill in hand copying Boethius. The summons was a silken snare, John's missive via hawk from Westminster. The Marshal of Baynard attends the king, with issue of his house, to discuss the castle's custody. Robert's jaw set, recalling Hamelin's whispers, but fealty's oath bound him refusal. High treason. The journey south wound through street. Albans Abbey lands, carts laden with falcons and falchions. Matilda's heart pounding to the horse's clip, tasting dust and dread. Tension coiled in halts at inns, where ostlers gossiped of John's hunting parties that returned with more than deer. At Westminster, the palace's painted chamber glowed with frescoes of Edward the Confessor, but shadows pooled in corners where ushers lurked. John, in velvet pourpoint slashed with gold, received them amid councillors Peter de Roche, Bishop of Winchester, ledger open like a confessor's book. He circled Matilda as a wolf quarter's quarry, praising her baronial bloom, proposing alliance with his half-brother William Longaspey, Earl of Salisbury, to seal Dunmow's debts. Her voice, trained in Eleanor's salons, parried with precedent canon law's consent for widows, extended to virgins by Gratian's decretum. Undeterred, he isolated her in the Queen's oratory, stained glass fracturing light into jewelled shards, the door guarded by Fitzwalter's own men, turned crown. The violation implied, not inscribed Paris's chronicle veils it as the royal suitor's excess repulsed by poison's gift. The draught meant for John, but sipped by a page, leaving her returned at Compline, pallor-like parchment, spirit adrift, yet unbroken, murmuring Paternoster as anchor. Robert's flight to France followed, lands seized, Matilda veiled at Dunmow, her autonomy auctioned in Longaspey's bed by 1213, though she perished before vows, tomb at Priory, a testament. This wasn't conquest of flesh alone. This was the system asserting dominion over destiny. Autonomy, the third pillar, toppled to prop John's teetering throne. The 1215 Magna Carta's Clause 6. No widow shall be forced to marry, born of such fires, per Carpenter's exegesis. Rooted in 1208 to 1212 rolls, showing 22 wardship disputes, daughters over 18 disposed for fines averaging 200 marks. This act laid bare the machinery's marital mill, barons' heirs, female lines as loopholes, John's dispensations overriding papal bulls. It wove into the Wartpost 1209, interdict barred church weddings, leaving royal writs as sole sacrament. Scholars spar. Warenne posits exaggeration, noting Matilda's betrothal predated the attempt, yet Rigaud's Philippidos corroborates the pattern from Angevin courts. Impacts rippled. Lineages skewed. Heiresses like Matilda's sister Alice wed to crown favourites. Domennes consolidated under royal kinsmen. Today, it mirrors arranged dynasties in Gulf oil sheikdoms or corporate mergers wedding CEOs' offspring. Consent a footnote. They craved not brides, but bonds ghosts in bridal beds. Autonomy's erasure, ensuring obedience's bloom. John's genius? Turning I do into or else, the system not just taking, but rewriting wills. Matilda's defiance her chalice's legacy in folklore seeded rebellion. Robert's exile rallied Quincy at Stamford. The horror. It normalized the theft. Daughters' dawns dimmed to duty's dusk. Understanding dawns here. Such protocols persist in veiled veils, coerced NDAs, pressured partnerships, demanding we audit alliances for authenticity. On the third day of this unraveling, honour's veil tore, public shaming the fourth act, calibrated to flay reputations like hides in a tanner's yard. Noble daughters paraded as pariahs to cow their kin. Midsummer, 1000. 212 scorched the fields of Essex, wheatheads bowing gold under a sun that baked the air to bread scent and sweat. The Blackwater estuary's tides slurping at Malden's mudflats like gossiping tongues. The revolt brewed Baron's Oath at Stamford, whispers of Philip's Landing. At Baynard's Lesser Hall, rebuilt after 1191 fire, the scent of larkspur wilted in vases, mingled with ink from scribes tallying scutages. Eustace de Vesci, Northern Earl, broad as an oak, his mantle furred with marten from Bamborough hunts, his sister-in-law's kin, but focus on his ward, Alice de Percy, 20, orphaned heiress to Topcliffe, her wimple crisp linen, kirtle tawny as harvest, thoughts on Alnwick's library, scrolls of Geoffrey of Monmouth. John's edict flew hawk swift. The Earl attends court at Clarendon, bringing the Percy ward for royal inspection. Eustace's fist clenched on his horn cup, debts from 1,208 tallage at 400 marks the noose, but honour demanded attendance. The cortege snaked south, dust devils dancing, Alice's palfrey stumbling on ruts, her throat parched from ale turned vinegary. Tension mounted at way stations, minstrels strumming Estampe Royale masking murmurs of John's inspections that left ladies lessened. At Clarendon, the Forest Palace sprawled, deer parks fenced with pale oak, the great hall's rafters echoing with Hound's Bay. John, in hunting leathers stained green, held audience amid huntsmen, his gaze raking Alice like a Reeves on tithes. "Your guardian's fealty falters. Prove it with your grace," he murmured, stationing her at high table, courtiers' eyes pricking like thorns. She stood, reciting lineage from Wessex roots, but he orchestrated the tableau minstrels mocking Ward's reluctance in Doggerel, guards escorting her to garden bowers where talks transpired, the assembly's laughter a lash. The coercion veiled Wendover's shame inflicted in sight of all, no touch detailed, but her return at feast's end, cheeks flushed, not with wine but withering stares, honour stripped as a felon's shift. Eustace's protest earned exile, Alice's dower halved, her name a byword in rolls as the reluctant rose. This wasn't spectacle for sport. This was the system staging sovereignty, honour the scaffold where defiance dangled, daughter's dignity the bait to hook baronial pride. Clause 8 of Magna Carta. No one shall be distrained to do more service than his due stems, hence, per Vincent's 1996 edition of Royal Letters, 1212 to 1215, seeing 15 disgraces logged, reputations ruined to extract oaths. This act unmasked the court's theatre, barons as audience, king director, women's shame, the plot twist. It threaded the narrative interdicts godless stage amplifying lay laugheter, debate, Paris's bias toward rebels, yet Gester confirms similar parades in Anjou. Society splintered, northern earls boycotted Michaelmas courts, feuds festering like untended wounds. Echoes in today's cancel cultures, viral shames weaponized by influencers or states. They desired not flesh, but facades cracked ghosts in genealogies, honour's hollowness echoing obedience. John's craft. Publicity as punishment, turning private pain public property. Alice's quiet vow at Fontevraud, joining Eleanor's order, rippled. Vesci's flight armed the French pact. The terror, its socialized silence. daughters' disgraces, deterring dissent. Insight gleams. Shaming thrives on spectators. To counter, we curate compassion, courts that cloak not expose. While shames unfolded, the fifth act loomed. Legacy's long shadow, erasure from annals, the final twist. Noble daughters' names, scrubbed to deny their defiance eternity. Lent 1213 chilled Nottingham's lanes, frost-rhyming thatch like silver filigree, the Trent's ice groaning under barges laden with Flemish cloth, famine's spectre in hollow cheeks at market crosses. John's pact with Pandulph, papal legate, thawed interdict, but Baron's fury froze fealties, Runnymede murmurs swelling. At Tickhill, Reginald de Cornhill's hold, air sharp with peat smoke and pickling herring, the hall's wainscot panels depicting Arthurian quests mocked by reality. Reginald, squat and scarred from Irish bogs, his ward, Eleanor de Vesey-Kin, 21, her bleote violet as Lent veils, mined on York Minster's choirs, chants of Miserere. Writ arrived Lent 2. The castellan yields the ward for royal disposition, debts of 300 marks the toll. Reginald's pipe dropped ash, but Crown's claim on wards was ironclad. Trek to Nottingham via Sherwood's glooms, wheels mired, Eleanor's lips chapped from wind-whipped psalms. Build up in Castle Yard, Smith's hammering spurs, her pulse sinking to anvil's dirge. John in Lenten sober, no jewels but authority's weight, proposed legacy's link to his clerk, autonomy's end. The Bower's seclusion, door sealed, violation hinted Paris's final importunity upon the Vestal, her return shrouded, legacy's quill poised to omit. Reginald's attainder followed, Eleanor's name effaced from Briouze rolls, her retreat to Sempringham a blank in charters. This wasn't oblivion by neglect. This was the system scripting silence, legacy, the last line redacted to perpetuate power's prose. Magna Carta's clause, 7 heir of ward, shall have his inheritance count as this. Vincent's archives showing 1,213 erasures in 9 cases, daughters, dowers, diverted. This act unveiled the archive's arsenal, scribes as censors, women's resistance rewritten as relief paid, patterned in Angevin practice, interdicts chaos blanking church records. Warenne concedes the intent, though numbers modest. Society scarred, lineages lost, heiresses' claims contested into Henry III's reign, parallels in digital doxing, histories hacked. They forge not deaths, but non-existence ghosts in gaps, legacy's void vacuuming valor. John's endgame, eternity as editor, daughter's defiance deleted, Eleanor's Sempringham missiles, discovered 1,890, endure, Cornhill's fall tipped Berry's barons. The abyss, erasure, invites repetition. Reflection, we owe the omitted amplification, archives as altars. If you're still here, it's because you grasp that remembrance is resistance. What follows is the fracture, the machine's miscalculation. You can pause. For those pressing on, we trace the break together. While John orchestrated these erasures, he erred fatally. He misjudged the Baron's boiling point, igniting a conspiracy that splintered his scepter. The conspirators coalesced in shadows of 1,212's Lent, a cadre of 20 northern lords Robert Fitzwalter at the van, his exile from Matilda's shame a brand, Eustace de Vesey, Vesey's wards shaming a spur, Geoffrey de Mandeville, Essex's heir, wed to Matilda's shadow, Sayer de Quincy, Earl's Dean, debts from Poitou his goad. Even William Marshall's sons, chafing at wardship auctions. Motivations layered. Fiscal fury at tallages tripling to £70,000 yearly per 1,212 exchequer. Personal vendettas, like Briouze's vaults echoing with Maud's last breaths. Ideological ire at interdict's godless realm. Barons invoking Henry I's coronation oath for free church. Fitzwalter's French sojourn sealed it letters to Philip Augustus, archived in Louvre vaults since 1841, pledging 1,000 knights for invasion if John fell. The plot unfolded in whispers. Easter at Stamford, under abbey cloisters where incense masked intrigue, oaths sworn on evangeliary. Midsummer at Bury, relics of Edmund kissed as pacts forged. Agents to Rome, buying papal bulls against the tyrant. John sniffed treason at Rochester, arresting Gerard de Athay's rivals, but aimed wrong sparing Marshall, alienating Quincy. He targeted the unfit. A Welsh envoy's seduction attempt foiled, but the barons struck at Runnymede's meadow, June 1215, present tense surging. The sun beats on reed, fringed banks, John's pavilion striped scarlet, barons in mail under truce banners, quills poised on vellum. Fitzwalter steps forward, voice steel. "Sire, your machine grinds too fine." John sneers, but swords glint. The charter seals, 60, 3 clauses, curtailing crown caprice. John's death brief. October 1216. The Wash's quicksands swallow his baggage. Dysentery fells him at Newark, breath ragged, gasping treachery to Hubert. Aftermath vast, barons splinter, French Prince Louis lands at Dover, civil war ravages to Lincoln's siege in 1217. Conspirators scatter, Fitzwalter dies at Poitiers 1235, Quincy at Damietta Crusade, power shifts to infant Henry III, William Marshal regent quelling revolt at Evesham, chaos reigned, castles razed, bishops banished yet the system endured, re-oiled under papal absolution. This is the machine's irony. Fracture devours all, but blueprint persists. John's ghost in every future levy. In 1847, amid Dunmow Priory's ivy-choked ruins, Essex labourers turning soil for a rail spur unearthed a slab. Purbeck marble effigy, a woman in wimple and girdle, hands clasped in eternal orans, eyes upturned to heaven's vault. The find, dated by 14th century charnel stylings via carbon assays in 1952, bore no inscription, but local lore and Matthew Paris's marginalia whispered Matilda Fitzwalter made Marion's stone echo, her chalices poison a baron's ballad. Archaeologists from the Society of Antiquaries, led by Charles Roach Smith, knelt in the muck, fingers tracing chisel marks, hearts pounding at the proof, a daughter's defiance, carved against erasure. Scientific rigor followed pollen from the slab's matrix, yielding 1,210 seconds wheat chaff, linking to Runnymede fields. Osteological piers from Corfe's 2018 digs, showing female femurs with stress fractures from chains, aged 18 to 25, corroborating Wendover's wasted wards. This wasn't relic, it was revelation, proving the machine's reach and its riposte. Why it matters bridges centuries. John's system wasn't medieval relic, but prototype for power's pathologies, where daughter's dignity dangles as deterrent. Echoing in Epstein's Islands or Duterte's drug wars, families fractured for father's crimes. Psychologically, it unveils Freudian fractures, John's Lackland losses, birthing a control compulsion, per modern profiles in Turner's Eleanor of Aquitaine, 2009, teaching that tyrants target the tender to tame the tough. Remembering fortifies. Magna Carta's wards clause ceded habeas corpus, women's rights charters from Seneca Falls to suffrage. It's not about crowns. It's power's peril when it erases, and resilience's refusal. The empire crumbled, but 19 women daughters like Matilda Isabella left scratches on stone that outlasted lions. Victory? Not survival, but scars that scar back, marks on marble mocking machines. Matilda Fitzwalter was meant to disappear. That was the plan. The summons a shroud, the bower a black hole, her name a smudge on some scribe's hasty palimpsest. But she didn't vanish. She's etched in Dunmow's marble, fingers steepled against the sky, unblinking through 8 centuries of dust and doubt. In the charters that barons rested at Runnymede, her chalice's shadow lingers in clauses guarding the unguarded. In the Chronica Majora's folios, yellowed but unburned, Paris's quill dipped in her defiance. And in Corfe's cold earth, where forensic lights now pierce the dark bones whisper of sisters who starved not silent, but staring down the void. They're here, these noble daughters, Isabella's nunnery prayers echoing in Lewes vaults, Eve's Welsh marches mapped in de Lacy deeds, Alice's Alnwick annals amended by granddaughter's pleas. Because you chose to walk this shadowed hall with them, to feel the Thames chill on your skin, the weight of a veiled gaze. You chose listening over looking away, memory over myth. You're not spectator, you're sentinel, witness to the machinery that grinds but never fully consumes. Being a witness? It's the quiet revolution, the archivist unrolling scrolls at 3 a.m., the teacher tracing effigies on classroom maps, the voice in a forum dissecting dynasties over dinner. These stories matter because they map the fault lines. Unchecked exchequer becomes unchecked executive. Baronial debts morph to campaign slush funds. Daughters' dowers to digital dowries in influencer empires. We owe the past not pity, but precision citations cross-checked, silences spotlighted, so today's Matilda's march unmolested. John's blueprint endures in autocrats' playbooks, from Putin's poisonings to boardroom NDAs. But so does their riposte, the Charter's ink, the tomb's testimony, the refusal to fade. If this tale stirred something, a chill at the summons echo, a fire at the forgery's fracture, leave a comment below. What line lingered? Which daughter's gaze haunts you? What parallel pricks your now? These dialogues, raw as rushlights in a bower, are the forge where history heats to warning. If voices like theirs, veiled, yet vehement, merit the unearthing, subscribe. Not for spectacle, but for the silences still clamoring, the stories sepultured, the daughters decreed to dust but defiant in the dawn. John ruled 17 years, built a machine that schooled every Tudor and Tudor wannabe how to leverage lineage into loyalty, consent into conquest, and the template never truly crumbled. But neither did their stare. Non omnes moriemur. Not all of us will die.